I'm Cheryl Wilkerson from the Blazing Hot Morning Show here at WNSB from the Crump Suite. We are broadcasting live from the L. Douglas Wilder Performing Arts Center for the U.S. Senatorial Debate hosted by the Center for African American Public Policy that is right here at Norfolk State University. We welcome Delegate C.E. Cliff Hayes, Jr., delegate from the 77th District and alumna of Norfolk State University. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Behold.
Behold the green and gold. So when you were at Norfolk State University, what did you study?
I studied computer information systems, which fell under the business department, so I minored in accounting and majored in computer information systems.
And now, as you represent your constituency, how has that factored into what you do on a somewhat larger level now?
Well, here at the Virginia General Assembly, I'm proud to be a member of Appropriations, and I actually chair the Capital Outlay Subcommittee of Appropriations. So when we're talking about any long-term debt and construction on our college campuses or even across the Commonwealth, then I'm happy to chair that subcommittee. As a part of Appropriations and a member of the Higher Ed Subcommittee, I was proud to carry legislation the budget amendment that actually started the Center for the African American Public Policy here at Norfolk State University. So I'm a proud alum of this university. Is where I got my start, and my foundation is built on top of that actually. But our HBCUs just mean so much.
They do.
Not only to the African American community, but the stronger we are educationally with our HBCUs, our community at large is stronger.
Do you think the community at large understands that and recognizes that?
Well, when I look at the history, probably the last 25 years or so, and the way that our HBCUs have been funded, they have been woefully lacking in funding compared to the majority white institutions that are state funded. And so it's not enough for us to accept crumbs, and I'm speaking in terms of proportion. Historically, there's been some funding coming to our HBCUs, but not at the tune and the level that other state-owned institutions have been. And so since being on Appropriations, and the last year alone, we have increased the funding of our historically black colleges and universities. Even, in fact, during this General Assembly session, pre-COVID, there was about $120 million additional funding to the state colleges and universities that are HBCUs. And we were proud to sponsor that funding to our HBCUs.
What do you think is your most important job? You have a lot of fields to cover when you become a delegate. How do you prioritize?
Well, I mean, it's just like anything else, just as we do in our families. We have, of course, those resources, that income that comes in. And in government, it's said that there are unlimited demands, right, with limited resources. And it does actually come down to prioritizing what's going to be most important. When it comes to economic development, that's extremely important. But I believe the most important way to support economic development is through K-12 and higher education. If you want to make sure that our economy flourishes, then you need a workforce that flourishes as well. And so that starts with the investment of our young people. And I actually made the mistake of mentioning K-12 through higher ed. It actually starts sooner than that. It's the early childhood education initiatives also that will help us be on a much stronger footing.
Someone submitted a question. Describe the homework gap. How does it look here in Virginia? What actions, immediate and long-term, do you propose that would support, the school divisions, the different localities, and how can we eliminate the homework gap?
So the homework gap, I'm not quite understanding what you're getting at there.
Many students can't go home and do their homework because they don't have the resources there.
Yeah, if anything that we've learned during this COVID crisis that we're in right now, catastrophe actually, it's not just a problem, it's a catastrophe, is the fact that there is a digital lack of funding for certain communities.
Correct.
Black communities, communities of color, versus other communities, i.e., when we're talking about a constitution, state constitution that says that every child will receive a quality, high quality education and have access to such for every citizen, every child in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's what the Constitution says. Well, there was a time when that meant making sure that they got a textbook, right, that wasn't a hand-me-down textbook. But to me, with the background in technology, I clearly understand that there's a difference when we're talking about quality access when it comes to digital media. So if children are expected to do homework assignments from home, then it matters if you have access to the internet. Whether that be families trying to drive somewhere to a local McDonald's to do their homework, or even in the case where many of the technology and cable data provider, internet providers are offering special plans, $10, $15 a month, you can have access to the internet. That's still not enough, because if you have access to the internet at slower speeds, it matters.
It matters.
That no longer is access to a high quality education. If school systems are requiring assignments online, and then some kids, it's taking 3 hours to do an hour's worth of work, whereas some households, they're finishing their assignments, etc., right at home.
As a member of the House of Delegates, how do you stop police from killing black people?
I think it goes beyond legislation. It's more than just legislating this. This is ingrained over 401 years of black people being put in a situation of oppression. And so we have to make sure that the truth is told.
We
as a community. And so legislators in our education, through the school systems, through the economy, through the banking laws, through everything, that everyone understands the true history of this oppression that has occurred, so that there is no falsifying, if you will, going forward, where people are trying to make you feel guilty about talking about the truth. We have to start with the truth as a foundation. From there, we can begin to move forward. But if you're sitting there and unwilling to listen to the truth, that's a problem.
I believe they're not willing to listen to the truth because in their minds you are accusing them of something that I didn't do. That was years ago. My great-great-grandfather didn't do that. I didn't do that. There's a sense of guilt. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. And so when they have that sense of guilt, they're not open to listening. And what we're saying is we're not trying to guilt you. We're not saying it was you, but we're saying this is the history and this is what has happened. Listen to me so we together can come up with a solution.
Yeah, and the interesting part about that is not only the historical perspective, but the ethical and moral thing to do. So I don't care whether you're looking at historically and you're blaming it on your grandparents or whatever. Today, you know right from wrong, morally and ethically. So let's do what's morally and ethically correct today, going forward as well, as opposed to trying to say We didn't have anything to do with it back then, so we can just scrap all of that and let's just move forward. No, we have to start back from the founding of this country, where many people, blacks in particular, were put into slavery. And then even to go in a much more savage and gangster way, not only slavery, but to take the land away from individuals who were here even before them, and then not want to acknowledge that.
Yes.
You know, is the most heinous of it all. So we have to move forward from at this point to make sure that we acknowledge the truth. Right now, Cheryl, and you talk about, I think earlier we were speaking about training and whether or not it's the training. It's not the training that's causing law enforcement, police officers to shoot people down as though they're animals. It is the systemic racism and the feeling as though you're untouchable and not going to be held accountable. Right now, but nothing but by the grace of God and just sheer dumb luck and a blessing, that I have a cousin who's alive today. This whole notion of militarizing the police, where they come in with shields and riot gear and these rubber bullets and tear gas and all of this. I mean, I have a cousin, Justin Howell is his name. Great student, more of a introvert, but just inquisitive. So he had decided to attend a march just within a week after the killing, the murder of Brother George Floyd. So he's a student at Texas State University. So he goes down to observe a protest, and he was peacefully standing there using his cell phone recording activity. Wasn't bothering anyone. An officer shoots him in the back of his head, fracturing his skull. Brain damage is the result. His limp body hits the ground. Those around him have to beg the police for assistance in trying to give him some kind of medical assistance. And guess what? They didn't even provide any medical assistance to him. They told them to take him across the street to the police station. So following orders, they carried his limp body across the street to the police station for medical attention. If that wasn't egregious enough that he was shot in the head, they fired on the individuals carrying his limp body. Police officers were shooting them, trying to bring him to safety. That reminds me of some crazy, horrid war scene in a movie or something where, you know, someone's trying to bring their partner to safety and drag him to, and then there's a sniper somewhere that no one can see firing on them. That's what Justin Howell went through.
How is he today?
He is improving daily. It's going to be a marathon, if you will. But he is forever altered. His life is altered.
Family. It's not just him, it's his entire family.
Absolutely. It's this country. Because, I mean, you look at the response after that officer shot Justin. The next day at a police press conference, the chief of police was crying, and the officer with him praying for Justin. That was the snapshot that day. 2-3 days later, once the legalese get involved,
correct,
admonishing the chief for admitting they made a mistake, the story has changed. They're saying Justin fractured his skull when he fell and hit the ground. And
that is the way we have been recorded in history forever.
Yeah. And not only that, Cheryl, I mean, Justin's doctors have reported to the family, to us, that the fracture came from being shot in the head.
Of course.
Number two, even if they try to take that position, that he fractured his skull when he hit the ground, would he have hit the ground if he wasn't shot? Why'd you shoot him in the head in the first place?
For standing there taking video.
Yeah.
Because he was in black skin.
Exactly.
Can you leave us with your thoughts on the importance of voting?
During this legislative session in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Virginia General Assembly has made it easier to vote, much more easier than ever here in the Commonwealth. Historically, we know the story about how people have died. People have been shot, waters, everything, all of these obstacles put in the way. So we should want to participate and not leave it up to someone else to make those decisions for us. We now have early voting, and so there's not only an election day, I call it the deadline, we're in election season now. So for the first time, we're able to vote 45 days prior to that November election. So we've started as far as September the 18th is when it started. And when it comes to voting for the people who had to navigate their vocation and get to work on time and try to make it to the polls before they closed once they got off from work, some people. Well, in Virginia, we voted this past session as of July 1. So November, Election Day is a holiday. So Election Day is a holiday. We have early voting.
We can get it done.
We can get it done.
Okay.
We have no excuse absentee mail-in ballot situations as a part of appropriations. We're funding these drop boxes and other things that will be available to people all around the Commonwealth. We're making voting easier as opposed to making it harder. When you go to DMV now, because of the new laws, instead of you waiting to be asked whether or not you want to register to vote and opt in to a voting process, folks going there now will have to opt out. You literally will have to say, I don't want to register to vote, not to be registered.
Very good. Delegate Cliff Hayes, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate the information.
Always a pleasure, Cheryl. Glad to be here.